Hello there, and I welcome all of you back, guys, to another Chris Chan Quickie article. Now, as we are going through Chris's business ventures and, well, everything that, to be honest, Chris doesn't really seem to know about business, probably both back then and right now, we have to contend ourselves with one of the biggest defenders that Chris will always use whenever, in any instance, he wants to be taken seriously, and that is his Sonichu copyright. Documentative proofs that Chris's creation is legitimately his own, and he has absolutely all the freedom and rights to express it and to sell his IP however he chooses. However, if Chris actually had done his homework and simply faced facts, Chris would have worked out that this would have been nigh impossible, and the actual certificate of registration is not necessarily what Chris thinks it is. So let's get through it, shall we? Anyone using my characters and all without my consent are criminals, and such people should be reported to the police immediately. And this is on the old Wikipedia's copyright page anyway. So, as with many things, Chris has a very limited understanding of copyright and how it's enforced. He is vaguely aware of what it is, some sort of legal right / document that creates of things have that lets these... I am going to read that again. He is vaguely aware of what it is, some sort of a legal right that creators of things have that lets these creators to tell others what they can and cannot do. A very naive view, though not entirely incorrect. Chris really giving it to the executives, huh? Why is, like, Patrick Stewart in amongst them? What did Patrick Stewart do wrong to anybody? Sonichu as a copyrightable work. Chris really only had one real first-hand experience on the copyright questions that formed the basis of everything that followed. While working on a school project that required making a CD cover, his teacher successfully explained to him that Sonic the Hedgehog and Pikachu are characters created by other people, and he has no right to use them and has to create something original instead. Chris reacted to this by creating an original combination of the two characters, and thus Sonichu was born. In the father call, he also says the teacher that told him he had been clear with the beginning as far as copyright is concerned. However, the fact that the teacher unwisely accepted Sonichu as original cemented Chris's vague understanding of the law. And now, Chris is simply unwilling to learn the truth. In his mind, mashing together two different characters and putting a little C in a circle and is John Hancock creates completely new intellectual property that is his and his alone. In reality, any work that uses previously copyrighted work as a basis is a derivative work, even at the best of times. This means that while it may have substantial original elements that the creator definitely holds a copyright on, it cannot be published or distributed without the permission of the original copyright holders. The reality isn't entirely clear-cut, however, and there are several exceptions to this rule, both well understood, fair use doctrine which allows limited use of copyrighted material for journalistic and scholarly purposes, and less well understood ones. There's an ongoing debate about the emerging copyright issues like digital rights and the remixing arts. Unfortunately for Chris, Sonichu is a fairly clear-cut case of a derivative work. While the character design itself has some originality despite its blatantly derivative style, and as such might have passed the teacher's inspection, as far as backstory is concerned, Sonichu is explicitly said to be a fusion of two existing characters, by Chris as its creator and in the comic story itself. Fundamentally, Chris wanted Electric Hedgehog Pokemon. If they are just some made-up characters and not Pokemon, they just aren't true enough for him. Unfortunately, Chris doesn't understand that such made-up characters are how people define creativity. Many creators do indeed borrow ideas from another work to create inspiration for original stories and concepts. Had Chris took inspiration from Pokemon and Sonic and made his own original creations that weren't just two franchises mishmashed together, it would be fine. However, the Sonichu comic makes copious usage of concepts from them both, as well as a myriad of others, meaning that anything Chris does to profit from Sonichu would render him liable to be sued. This would be harmless enough if he weren't actually profiting from it, but he is, and if any of the franchises he has plagiarized from decided to pursue legal action, Chris would be torn to shreds in court. Fortunately for Chris, an autistic moron hawking products on Etsy is unlikely to incur the wrath of a major multinational company. The worst he's likely to receive is a cessation demand. And even then, by the time we actually discuss Chris's Quickville shopping store and everything like that, well, what Chris actually makes from that allegedly is, well, quite frankly, even outrageous, if that is legitimately under the radar. Banned from Lulu. Chris was banned from self-publishing site Lulu in December 2015, since the staff recognized that Sonichu is a piece of fan fiction. The sting of an actual business calling him out on the truth seemed to finally impress upon the impossibility of defending Sonichu as an original work. More than a year after the ban, Chris continued to scapegoat Lulu to explain why he was unwilling to work on the comic he had been paid over $1,000 to do, saying that, in January of 2017, the pester of legality questions and disputings in my creations and work is the biggest reason that caused him to have an inability to feel like drawing and writing the stories. An inability to feel. And you get paid $1,000 to do 100 pages, and the best you could do was 16. Chris, at this point, I don't think people would care about what you feel. You know what? People would roll over, and people would absolutely get on their knees and do things unspeakable for $1,000. And Chris just, well, again, this more comes down to the fact that Chris has no concept or basis for the actual value of money. So there's also that. Chris as an enforcer of rights. That's a terrifying title if there ever was one, wasn't it? Chris is very paranoid regarding his copyright, and will frequently hand out all of his personal information to complete strangers if he thinks it can be contested. This has backfired in a number of ways. Chris has encouraged people to report copyright infringements to the police. The police, unfortunately, don't do much when random citizens report civil offences such as copyright infringement. Even if Chris had the rights to the works in question, suing people for copyright infringement would be Chris's job and his job alone, or that of a representative who he has specifically appointed to that specific task. Unsurprisingly, Chris is a total hypocrite. When it comes to abusing the work of other creators, in the space of 13 and a half issues, Chris pulled characters and concepts from innumerable franchises, and even went so far as to steal original characters from fans and sweethearts, with little respect shown to their creators. He's even had the balls to take another creator's characters, alter them, and demand that thenceforth they be portrayed the way he has made them in the original material. Despite how firmly Chris holds on to his views of copyright, when directly challenged on why it's okay for him to rip things off, but not for other people to do the same to Sonichu, he's unable to think of a response. Neither does he just do the right thing and apologize and makes amends for what he does. Yeah, notice how Chris... that just about says it all, and for any business owner in the world, that's the sort of thing that makes you never want to hear the words Chris Chan or Sonichu ever again, because that says it all. When Chris just has nothing to say, not an apology, not any sort of pledge to make things better, nothing. Furthermore, Chris refuses to listen to the original creators of these original characters when they ask to have their characters removed. The best example would be the fight between Evan and Chris over the character Simone LaRoche-Chu, a rip-off of Evan's original character Simone Chu. When Evan demanded that Chris remove Simona from the comics in an on-page death, Chris refused because it would take Wild Sonichu's girlfriend away. As time went on, Chris fought tooth and nail to keep Simona in, going so far as to write out a scenario where Sonichu is told to tell Evan that Simona likes Quickville. In the end, it took 2 shutdowns of the Wikipedia for Chris to finally surrender and kill off Simona, and he just resurrected her a few years later anyway, rendering this entire debacle meaningless. Also because apparently Chris just thought, well, just play ball and come back when, they think they've moved on. Licensing and terms of use. The MediaWiki software used on the Wikipedia had various built-in settings for content licensing. During installation, MediaWiki defaults to GNU Free Documentation License, which states that the content can be reused elsewhere for any purpose, as long as proper copyright holder attribution and license references are given. On the 6th of September 2009, a fan wrote to Chris and thanked him for allowing this reuse, which provoked an uncharacteristically swift response from Chris, demanding the wiki sysop not so politely to remove the obvious erroneous GDN FDL license. This prompted Chris to write his own copyrights and terms of use pages. The legal problems caused by Chris's terms are detailed elsewhere in the article. The terms of use are even weirder. Any and all visually grotesque, shocking, and offensive works will be immediately deleted and not be uploaded or seen ever again. No resubmissions allowed of such pieces. All letters addressed to any name other than Christian Weston Chandler or Christopher Weston Chandler will be immediately disposed of with paper recycling or be returned to sender, with a frown face on it. Ooh, I'm so scared, Chris. All visually grotesque, shocking, and offensive artworks and letters will be disposed of properly as well. Fan sites should be pre-approved by Chris. Sending spam to Sega and Nintendo about making official Sonichu games is apparently part of terms of use. Apparently? What do you mean apparently? Either it is or it isn't, Chris. You can't use ambiguous jargon like that. Not in the legal world. Because lawyers would have ripped your terms apart the second they see that. Copyright registration. Believe it or not, Chris seemingly did pay the necessary $45 to somehow get Sonichu approved by the United States Copyright Office. Why Chris didn't just get a patent? Well, then again, a patent wouldn't have accepted this. On the 12th of November 2009, he also posted a scan of the confirmation letter he received to Wikipedia and posted a highly predictable "My heart level just went to 100% again" video. Psychologically, this copyright registration represents a big win for Chris, because it gives him what he thinks are bragging rights, even though he has no idea what the copyright registration actually means. Copyright registration isn't an official recognition of copyright. However, copyrights are granted automatically, and copyright registrations are only an official assertion that a specific work has been created at a specific date by the registrant. The registrations are only needed when suing another party for copyright infringement. So, for example, if Chris wanted to take somebody to court, Chris could showcase that this was done by the date set on blank. So therefore, it's proof that this is, well, as you say, the registration is there, and it's done. It was done specifically for that date. So this party can't say that they did it on that date, and play ball. The registration is only needed when suing another party for copyright infringement. It is not a registration of a trademark. Chris has no special rights for the name Sonichu itself. Finally, Chris made a critical mistake in filing the registration application. He described Sonichu as a work for hire, in the apparent belief that this meant that the comic was his primary occupation, when it really means that he created it on behalf of someone else, who is considered the creator for legal purposes. It should also be noted that the United States Copyright Office does not check whether or not a registrant's work is infringing. If Nintendo or Sega were to sue Chris, they would win very, very easily. It's clear that they hold the rights to original characters like Sonic and Pikachu, and Chris's work is derivative thereof. That's why large companies like Nintendo or Sega, they will have legal departments. They will have things archived. They will absolutely have every single thing they have in black and white, including the terms of whether or not somebody can use their work as a work for hire or not, or whether or not they have permission. In short, Chris's copyright registration doesn't mean his comics aren't non-infringing, nor does it effectively protect his own intellectual property. The use of copyright notices. The way Chris maintains his so-called copyrights within his work is so also baffling. It's possible he goes by the assumption that almost everything he draws must contain copious copyright notices, usually in a large disclaimer. Copyright Christian Weston Chandler, March 2002, ? It's worth noting that Chris obsessively includes copyright symbols in pictures he draws of Sonichu, including a picture he drew in the snow in his holiday greetings video and a doodle he drew on his ticket to the 2005 Anime Mid-Atlantic Convention. However, only daily newspaper comic strips have constant notices reminding about copyright due to their daily nature. In most forms of media throughout the world, one copyright notice at the beginning of the work is enough to assert rights, and only the year is noted in a copyright notice. Finally, the year of the creation of the specific work in question should be noted in the copyright notice. For example, Sonichu issue 10 should be copyright 2009 to 2010, quick. If Chris would want to specifically emphasize that Sonichu in general has existed since March 2000, he'd need to do so in an additional copyright notice. Example, Sonichu issue 10, copyright 2009 to 2010, quick, Sonichu character at quick March 2000. But don't tell Chris any of this, because Chris might actually just ignore it like everything else. Christians on the lookout. Bit ironic after what I just said. Long before his discovery by the trolls, Chris created a web page called Christians on the Lookout, which linked to his main Sonichu site. Chris made the site no later than May of 2006. Exactly how he used the site is not clear, especially since his main site did not link to this page. Chris's paranoia and arrogance regarding his copyright are on full display here. A message for all who are out to use the Sonichu name. From Christian Weston Chandler, original creator of Sonichu and related characters and materials. I just want to inform all persons, fans of Sonichu or otherwise, that Sonichu was originally created on March 17th, 2000, and I have a copyright on my faithful electric hedgehog Pokemon. I am very proud to share my Sonichu with the people who appreciate my creativity in Sonichu's world. I often do a search of Sonichu, and currently I only want to see links to my Sonichu site, or related sites. If I see links to websites with any person who has used his name, I will view it. If I should see the Sonichu name used to describe any character other than my original electric hedgehog Pokemon, I will send you an email to inform you if you have intruded into copyrighted territory, and request that you remove the name from your website or form entry, and change it to something else. If, however, you do not abide to the request or not reply to the email within 14 days, I may take legal action against you. I am not a mean person, and I am not out to start any trouble, so please do not use the Sonichu name in vain. If, however, you would like to create a fan website to describe my electric hedgehog Pokemon, please send me an email to quicksonichu@aol.com with information and link about your fan site. I will view your fan site, and if I like it, I, Christian Weston Chandler, will send you an approval email, and you may keep your website on the web. If I find it offensive, I, Christian Weston Chandler, will send you an email asking you to either change the content to something else or remove the website from the web. Also, if you would like to see Sonichu as a real video game or catch him in a Pokemon title, please send your request to Nintendo of America Incorporated or Nintendo Power Magazine. Please raise the hype on Sonichu so that I will be able to legally talk to the people of Nintendo of America Incorporated and make a deal. Sonichu and I, Christian Weston Chandler, thank you for following the legal guidelines expressed here. I sincerely hope that you enjoy the stories of my Electric Hedgehog Pokemon, and I also hope that you will voice your hype and interest about Sonichu and my world of Quickville to Nintendo of America Incorporated so that Sonichu can become a video game, cartoon or anime, and all that other neat stuff. Have a zapping day. This has been a message from Christian Weston Chandler, original creator of Sonichu. All Sonichu materials copyrighted March 2005 by Christian Weston Chandler. It is unknown whether or not anybody ever received a message from Chris about this, nor were people going to give Chris the level of satisfaction, because Chris literally did that to himself for all the wrong reasons. Chris's motivations. In any case, Chris doesn't really care so much about what his copyright registration means and what it might or might not be good for. Practically speaking, to him, it's mainly just a crutch for his ego. In the aftermath of his feud with Liquid Chris, he sees it as the final and clinching proof that he himself is the true and original creator of Sonichu. On the 26th of November 2009, he posted the following as a part of an announcement on the Wikipedia, which is quite illuminating. What, even more than the last one? Well, let's take a look. Also, I have been thinking, although all Sonichu merchandise sold online in the past I have labelled false, I did that because it came as a surprise to me then. I felt outraged appropriately. Most everyone can relate to that. It's comparable to if Godzilla or Clover, the Cloverfield monster, came to your metropolis and suddenly attacked your city. What the fuck are you talking about, Chris? I realise now that even though it is still considerably not official, it all still is an homage to my creation. So I'll make it clear to all those vendors. As long as it is not printed copies of my book's pages, or bootleg copies of my Christian Weston Chandler Yep I'm on TV DVD, and as long as I am quoted on all websites and vendors' locations as original creator of Sonichu, Roastew, Quickville, and all of such, I, Christian Weston Chandler, approve of such merchandise from day forward. At least to give you all, my patient loyal fans and trolls, something to quell your palates circa until official merchandise is sold in official stores such as Toys R Us, GameStop, Best Buy, Walmart, etc. and such. I have spoken. Oh, you've spoken quite enough, Chris, and I wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Apparently he felt the need to express the time as well that this was sent, so I guess. In other words, Chris doesn't really care if other people use his supposed intellectual property, so long as he's the one that gets the credit for it, not that imposter in brown stripes. The idea expressed here is not unlike that in the Creative Commons attribution license. Patreon leaks. Since Chris began using Patreon for donations in exchange for his continued work on Sonichu issue 11 and beyond, he had, for the first time, an actual financial incentive to enforce the copyright of his work. Chris announced that he would initially release Sonichu 11 only to Patreon supporters, and this plan seemed to go off without a hitch until several patrons leaked the exclusive pages that Chris had released so far, then notified Chris in his YouTube comments. Chris took swift action to protect his only source of income besides his monthly tugboat. In C-Log 0641422017, Chris begins by denouncing the leakers by comparing their actions, leaking the comic pages early, to the physical theft of purses and cell phones. However, Chris's copyright continues to be completely unenforceable, and it is almost certain that future Patreon pages will be leaked as well. Now, insofar as what like actual, comic book artists do to prevent stuff like this, I'm not entirely sure, but there's got to be like, I know there's got to be systems in places, so these sorts of things, they do fall under the category of theft, by the way, but, well, that would be up to Chris to work out and to try and negotiate with Patreon, but how you could track the people who've been leaking this stuff down, there's got to be a ways around this somehow. Interestingly, Chris's intentions to keep future Sonichu, and this, by the way, happens to people who are not Chris, who are completely legitimate, but that's just sort of the game. Well, you got to find your way around this somehow. Maybe if the prices for this, but let's keep rolling. Interestingly, Chris's intentions to keep future Sonichu pages exclusive to his patrons could be considered a form of fraud, as D-Stex already paid Chris $1,000 in September 2015 to make 100 pages of Sonichu, which, according to Chris's page count estimate in C-Log 06232017, would cover the vast majority of the volume to be released. So, never mind then, I guess. But since D-Stex hasn't pursued legal action, we can only be left to assume that, well, he probably just left Chris to it. Chris's views. Chris is very protective of his characters. Chris believes that his characters are official parodies, thus he is allowed to create his multimedia empire on a legal loophole. What Chris fails to realize is that parodies are essentially mockeries of something they're based on, done for laughs or as a commentary on the original work. According to the US Supreme Court, parody is the use of some elements of a prior author's composition to create a new one that, at least in part, comments on that author's works. So if Chris was, say, making commentary on commercialization by making a pastiche of what was popular at the time, it would be fine. The fact that it is a parody and not plagiarism must also be made obvious. Sonichu and Rosechu are not parodies, just shitty recolors. Chris doesn't mean to make fun of the characters they're based on, nor make commentary of them. He slavishly imitates the kind of adventures they have in an attempt to tell his own stories. Even his most original character, well, apart from when he stopped doing that and it was because it was based entirely on Chris's adventures, or his own encounters with the trolls, even his most original characters are either based on someone he knows, or are cribbed extensively from existing characters. Chris intended for Sonichu 13 to be a crossover between his comic universe and the characters of the popular Planet Dolan YouTube channel. Much like Nintendo and formerly Sega, the producers of the channel likely have never heard of Sonichu. Well, I think some of them do. Much less gave Chris permission to use their characters. Had his plans went through, Chris would have likely offered a similar parody defense to his direct use of someone else's intellectual property. Ultimately, though, Chris canned these plans due to the Planet Dolan cast blocking him on social media, and the idea guys having other ideas in mind for the comic. In his disclaimer at the beginning of Sonichu issue 16, Chris revealed a new outlook on copyright law, made even more incoherent by the influence of the idea guys and his crumbling sense of reality. Isn't that just the way? Despite what this world's legalities are, all of the events in this book has happened not only in Quickville and Equestria and Canterlot High School, but everywhere else in that same dimension, where all of our fictional characters and individuals do exist and coexist. So events where Bowser, Dr. Eggman, and even Voldemort work together for a common goal of overtaking lands and worlds, that can happen. So in a passive-aggressive statement, and a fair and just warning, I say to those fat cat legal people of this world, anything is possible. And when all of those evils attempt something in this world, and someone writes and draws every single detail about it, chronicling it all, do not even encourage copyright/trademark lawsuits at all. That sounds more like a very, very vague threat than an actual an actual outlook. But then again, Chris was falling to the ire of becoming insane for somebody else's amusement for some reason. Music. Many of Chris's songs from his old Christian and the Hedgehog Boys project have been taken down on YouTube for copyright. If Chris knew this, he would likely argue that his songs are parodies and thus fair use. The problem is that Chris's songs aren't parodies, nor they are reviewing the said songs, nor are they just covers with an instrumental version of the original song playing in the background. Just like how Sonichu and Rosechew are recolors and not parodies. Chris's songs are just rewrites of the originals, with said original drowning out most of his voice. Even if Chris's songs were legitimate parodies, they never will, he would still need to create his own instrumental since the song recording itself is copyrighted. Most professional parody artists, including Weird Al Yankovic, hire backing bands. Weird Al also asked the original artists for their permission, because simply changing the words to a song doesn't make it a legitimate parody. There has to be some kind of criticism, and singing about food or boyfriend-free girls doesn't criticize the song itself. Words alone don't define copyright, and changing them will not get you out of a musical plagiarism lawsuit. Fan art. Chris believes he has the right to use any fan art depicting a Sonichu character for his own purposes. A key example in this is the banner for Patreon and YouTube, which uses Tricky, by the way, who I believe this was it Tricky who did like the fan art? I know Tricky did a design or something like that for a shirt that Chris used, but I'm not too sure if it was for anything else. For Sonichu and Rosechew. Even though the accounts are meant to showcase his own work, and he has not given credit to the original post or the original artist. It's a lovely piece of art. I am not stealing it. Well, thank you for letting us know, Chris. I am using it in full appreciation of the artist that drew it as much as possible. And it doesn't matter. It has Sonichu and Rosechew. They both, all of the others, and the city of Quickville are mine regardless. Does that include, the Guru fan art that people do of Sonichu and you as well, Chris? Do they count? Who holds the copyright to Christian Weston Chandler? Because he's a character in the story. That's a God. Could you imagine how funny it would be if somebody actually took out copyright registration on Christian Weston Chandler? Does that mean we can keep Chris? Oh my, that would be really, really funny. But neither does it also go to mention about the fact that Chris, even when it comes to developing new pages, Chris will actually trace and just draw over pre-existing work, which is also a form of plagiarism because, well, Chris is copying somebody else's work. It's absolutely what it is. But considering Tricky was more than saying fine or something like that, I probably wouldn't have been okay with this, but, well, what do you expect? I suppose if it means taking Chris to court and making him realize that, and because I think Chris would respond very, very harshly when you give him a very hard stop. You can't be lenient with guys like Chris. You need to tell them in the most blanket way possible. It's a yes or no. It's that you will do as you'll say or else, because it's how they work. Because, well, it's not exactly as if Chris isn't exactly particularly very demanding and aggressive in his responses either. But with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys learned a little bit something about copyright here today. And, well, yeah, this is literally only one issue that Chris would ever have, because I reckon you guys could come up with much better ideas than both I could or Chris could ever do. So, there is that. So, take care, and bye bye for now.